Antonio Castillo. Now there's a name that might not make the average fashion fan's heart skip a beat, the way Dior or Balenciaga does, but for true haute couture lovers, he's one of those quiet legends you can't help but admire. He was the embodiment of the gentleman couturier, elegant, discreet, and unfailingly refined, with just enough aristocratic drama to make every dress feel like a costume for a duchess who'd stepped straight out of an old Spanish palace. Born in 1908 in Madrid, Antonio Cánovas del Castillo de Rey, yes, imagine having that name on your luggage tags, came from a line of Spanish nobility. One of his ancestors was even a prime minister of Spain. It's almost like he was destined to dress queens and countesses. But instead of pursuing a life in politics like his forebears, young Antonio had his eyes set on beauty. Still, ever the dutiful son, he studied law and diplomacy first. He even held a diplomatic post in Paris for a time. But legend has it that in the quiet of his diplomatic apartment, he would spend hours sketching dresses instead of drafting treaties. Priorities. When the Spanish Civil War erupted, Castillo, like so many artists and intellectuals of his time, found himself in exile in Paris. There, far from the turmoil of his homeland, he was suddenly free to pursue his real passion. His charm, fluency in several languages, and impeccable taste quickly opened doors. He apprenticed with some of the greats, Paquin and Piguet, and even spent time at Elizabeth Arden in New York, where he got a first-hand look at the no-nonsense glamour of American high society ladies. But the defining chapter came when Jean Lanvin's daughter, Marguerite de Pietro, approached him in 1950 to take over the House of Lanvin. It was a daunting task. Lanvin was one of Paris's oldest couture houses, but after Jean's death, it risked becoming a dusty relic. Castillo swept in like a breath of aristocratic air, reviving Lanvin's image with crisp silhouettes, opulent fabrics, and just the right touch of Spanish theatricality. His style was never brash. He hated vulgarity. Instead, he adored a quiet splendor, coats lined with hand-embroidered gold threads, gowns that whispered rather than shouted, capes that trailed behind his clients like the train of a royal robe. And his clientele loved him for it. High society women flocked to him because wearing Castillo meant you looked like an empress, but never overdressed. You were dramatic, but dignified. And oh, those fittings. Paris couture fittings in the 50s and 60s were events in themselves. Gossip, champagne, tiny dogs in handbags. Castillo was a master at managing his clients' whims. There's a delicious story that once, when a certain duchess asked for yet another last-minute adjustment, Castillo quipped to a colleague, "My dear, they don't come for the hemline, they come for the flattery." He'd smile, nod, and make the change, because in couture, the illusion of perfection was everything. While his name was synonymous with elegance, Castillo never shied away from a bit of fantasy. He loved drawing inspiration from Spain's romantic past. Bullfighters, flamenco dancers, the Moorish splendor of Andalusia. Some of his most striking pieces featured bold sashes, gilt embroidery that looked like it belonged on a matador's costume, or cloaks fit for an old Spanish court. He was also part of that inner circle of brilliant Spanish designers who ruled Paris at the time. Think Cristóbal Balenciaga, Paco Rabanne, who came later, and even a young Oscar de la Renta. With Balenciaga, Castillo shared a special bond, mutual respect between two aristocrats of cloth. While Balenciaga was famously reclusive, Castillo was charming and witty, a diplomat through and through. They'd meet at quiet cafes, trading stories about difficult clients or the latest gossip from the Avenue Montaigne ateliers. But Castillo didn't just drape society ladies. He dressed actresses and even royalty. Some whisper that he once received a discreet request from a European queen who wanted her evening gowns to look regal but not matronly. Only Castillo could pull that off. A silhouette with just enough structure to stand at court, but enough softness to dance under chandeliers until dawn. His artistry wasn't confined to Paris. He adored the theater, and he had a real knack for costuming. In fact, in 1972, long after leaving Lanvin, he won an Oscar, yes, an Academy Award, for Best Costume Design for the film Nicholas and Alexandra. The costumes in that film are a masterclass in opulence, sweeping imperial gowns, gilded uniforms, fur-lined cloaks. Watching it is like stepping into a lost world of czars and grand duchesses, and you can feel Castillo's touch in every seam. In his private life, Castillo was famously discreet. He was gay at a time when the couture world was both a refuge and a trap. Open secrets, polite whispers, protective friendships. He kept a close circle, preferring quiet dinner parties with friends to wild public spectacles. And yet, he was always immaculate. Immaculately dressed, immaculately mannered. He was a man who could deliver the most devastating insult with such politeness that you'd thank him for it later. As the 60s turned to the 70s, the golden age of Grand Couture began to fade. Ready-to-wear was taking over. Youth culture didn't have much time for the aristocratic fantasy of Castillo's world. He left Lanvin in 1962, choosing to focus on stage and film, where fantasy still reigned supreme. Yet even as the fashion world changed, his loyal clients continued to cherish his creations. Those shimmering mandarin coats, regal velvet capes, and gowns embroidered like royal tapestries. Today, his name might not appear on every top 10 designers of all time list, but collectors and costume historians know a Castillo piece is a hidden jewel. A real Castillo gown doesn't scream for attention. It commands it, the way a grand Spanish duchess might glide across a ballroom, her silk skirts whispering secrets of old palaces and candlelit salons. So, if you ever come across one of his pieces at an auction or tucked away in a vintage shop, pause. Run your fingers over the embroidery. Feel the weight of the satin. In that moment, you're not just touching fabric. You're holding a fragment of a world where fantasy and elegance were stitched together by a man who never stopped believing that we all deserve to feel like royalty, if only for an evening.